But
yeah.
nice. Okay, we haven't got long, so let's make a start. Hey everyone, super nice to have you all here. If I haven't met you before, really nice to meet you. I'm Ollie. I run our global community here at Antler, looking after all of you awesome founders, non-funded, but also funded, all of our advisors and also investors I work on. So super awesome to have you all here. Got a super exciting fireside chat and casual AMA with Andrew, who's the director of community at mmhmm, which some of you may have seen recently. They just raised a bucket of cash from SoftBank, $100 million, and you only launched like a year ago, which is just absolutely crazy. But no, really excited to dive into community and mastering the art of how you build a community at such an early stage business, how you maintain the community, and hopefully at some point how you can monetize the community as you guys start to grow awesome companies. The format of the event, we've got about 55 minutes remaining. Andrew's going to do a keynote. He's going to talk about his career, a little bit about community. We're then going to do a fireside chat, just talking about the golden nuggets around community. Then it's down to you guys. We'll leave the last kind of 20 minutes to have you up on stage. If you've got any questions or burning questions for Andrew, I'm sure he'll be very happy to take it. But yeah, super excited. So Andrew, it's all over to you.
Awesome. This is super fun. Thanks everybody for having me. And my name's Andrew Owen. I'm based in San Francisco. I've been in San Francisco for about 8 years. And I was at a startup a year ago. I think that's how Ollie and I met. Coming right out of the pandemic, I jumped on board with a company called Run the World, which was like one of the first to market for a virtual events platform. And fascinating. We could do, Ollie, we could do another masterclass on that one. It was amazing to sort of see an amazing kind of moment, right? To start up a company. And then you probably haven't heard of Run the World, but you've probably heard of Hopin. And Hopin made choices that are putting them on the path to be one of the fastest companies to IPO, and Run the World is one that you've not really heard of. Anyway, that's a different masterclass. I'm here to really talk about community, but I will say that I don't have a super big clear agenda here. I'm here for you, so I'm going to share some of my path, how I got here, because I think that'll provide some really valuable context for seeing a career in community and community as it maps to specific companies and applications and things I've learned that I've sort of kept going along the way. But I love very specific examples. So if one of you has raises a hand and wants to do a quick workshop on something, on a problem you've got, let's do it. But first, let me give you a little preview. Of course, I'm using mmhmm for this presentation. We're a virtual camera. We basically bring sort of TV studio production qualities to all of your, your Zooming, your video conferencing, but just recording in general. And our fundamental belief is that employee generated videos is just an unbelievably massive opportunity, and it's coming, and video in the workplace is going to be essential to business. So bringing tools and that feel like it gives you creative power back over your videos is what we're all about. And we're a year old, and we just raised our Series B at 100 million, as Ollie said. So
allow myself to introduce myself.
Here we go. I'm not going to go all the way back to my childhood, but I grew up with images. I'm a child of the I was born in 1981. I cared about American football, I cared about supermodels, and I cared about rock and roll music. But the reason why I have these three pictures is because I started to develop a visual language at a pretty young age. My idea around photography was heavily shaped by the books and the posters that were in my room, these three things, right? And then I really got into photography in high school. And the picture on the left is a pre-Photoshop, dark room, just sort of virtuosic print by Jerry Ullsman. And then on the right is a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge made with a camera obscura by an amazing master artist named Abe Morrell. Now, the reason why I show you this is because I love pictures where the act of making it is part of the subject matter. So the actual process is part of the subject. And my career has really followed the camera. So it's been really fun to like go back and see what I was drawn to and what I'm drawn to. And I think not knowing it now, like not knowing it then, but from a very early age, I was drawn to like the boundaries of photography, the boundaries of like what you can do with a camera. I was really fortunate to be able to work with National Geographic. I got a grant to photograph bizarre festivals around North America, Native American powwows and the speed racing festival in Utah, hand fishing. This is in Oklahoma. But I also was tapped to be the director of a photography festival that celebrated iconic photographers. We brought them on stage. We projected their career images behind them in 4K. And we'd bring together, we'd take over old spaces and have huge projection parties to show people's work, up and coming photographers along with established. So in this audience right here, you might have, a National Geographic photographer back from assignment who hasn't even gone home yet. And like, a 17-year-old kid who's like enamored with photography. We also took over the town, like the downtown of Charlottesville, Virginia, which is my hometown. And we activated the space between the trees. And we like hung shows in the windows, in trees, in everywhere. It was a totally like, the idea was a really immersive environment. And this engendered an enormous sense of community. This was actually like a physical community of photographers around the world coming to another community. And it was this was 2007 to 2013 for me. So really like pre-Instagram, we were really doing it the old fashioned way. I left Charlottesville and moved to San Francisco to join Instagram. I was one of the probably first 75 employees. We were recently on the campus of Facebook, but we were pretty much autonomous. We got to do our own thing for many years. And then I left when we couldn't do that anymore. But I joined what was called the community team. And we were responsible for a few things, but primarily the Instagram account. So we used our own Instagram profile to feature stories from the community. We were basically a repeater. Like we would take the trends, the most interesting things, evergreen content or timely content, and we would reflect it back into the ecosystem, the Instagram ecosystem through our own platform. So, just a few examples here, like I went to Rio with Justin Timberlake. I helped pioneer our sort of Black History Month annual profiles, NBA Finals. I went to Michigan to work with the Shibutani twins before they went to Korea for the Olympics. And then also some things that were really kind of edgy for me that were really exciting were, 6-7 years ago, the Explore channel on Instagram was pretty rough. It didn't even have video yet. So I was part of a team that started to think about how do we bring video into the Explore experience? How do we curate timely content for the Explore channel? Snapchat was on the rise, and we were really being pushed to think about how we collect and reflect and package up like user-generated content from specific events, or like New York Fashion Week or the Oscars. And then I also helped create Instagram installations like out in the wild. We commissioned murals at photography festivals or certain community activation points. And then this mural was somebody who we had featured on the account, pulling back on our creative editorial decisions. Then we also found ways to take all that community content that we were discovering and actually make it a central part of the Instagram physical experience when you came into the corporate headquarters. So all of these screens are activated by playlists, essentially, of images that me and my team curated and themed, so that, like, when we say community is important to Instagram, it's like literally the first thing you see when you walk in. Like, you cannot miss this like wild world of the Instagram community that's happening at all times. I'm going to actually dive in a little bit on some of our editorial tactics, because that was our primary means of generating and building community at Instagram. Obviously, this is very specific to how Instagram did it, and not all of you all are in that kind of company, but I think it's worth knowing that, like, in the early days of Instagram, the algorithms were not that smart. The engineers who were even building the algorithms didn't even necessarily have a frame of reference for who to suggest, like who's a high quality follow. So what we were doing on the community team was basically doing the manual curation that the engines hadn't done yet. The engineers literally hadn't built the infrastructure to surface really valuable content. And maybe famously, I think this is sort of famously known, but I'll share it here anyway. Like, Facebook discovered that, like, if you don't follow like a certain number of people within 7 days, like your churn rate is super high. So what we were able to do as a non-engineering team was to surface all of this extraordinary content that was being produced by the community, and then allowing the engineering teams to help you discover accounts that you want to follow. And that actually was instrumental to our growth. And rather than just showing you Rihanna content where you can find anywhere, or Beyonce content, which is really on every platform, we were doing things like this, the weekend hashtag project, where we might say, hashtag nightlights. And like, basically it's a creative prompt to the community to go out, use Instagram in a way that maybe you wouldn't typically do, and like make pictures from the night. Like, stretch your camera, take your iPhone out, take your Android out, and try to make pictures. And then we're going to collate those. We're going to bring that together into a kind of roundup. But if you just check the hashtag, you'll just see this constant, like, new wave of content coming in. And that's a new way to discover. And people can comment on your stuff. Like, we were enabling all the best of the tools by actually getting people out there and using it, not just talking about it. We would also just, like, we had a curation team that was just devoted to looking at pictures that we love, that weren't even attached to a hashtag. Like, and then we would feature them. And then in the morning on, like, Monday, people would wake up and, like, have been featured on the most followed account on the internet. Like, that's such an endorsement from the company of, like, our belief in the community. But it's also, as a community member, like, you're just out there doing stuff, not necessarily even thinking about likes, and all of a sudden, like, you have this endorsement from the company. And, like, that really generated a lot of community love. Communities start to get together in person. So there's actually something called the Worldwide Instameet, where this was especially popular in Malaysia, where, like, groups of like 1,000 people who loved Instagram would get together at a specific location and just, like, go on, like, a big photo walk. And this became such an important community building tool for us that was generated by the community, that we started to really, like, take inventory of who the leaders of these communities were. And we would send them what we call Instameet kits. We would send them swag, we'd send them balloons, markers, like "Hello, my name is" stickers. We would basically help, like, not only sort of acknowledge and sort of encourage this kind of behavior, but we'd also, like, give people some resources that they wouldn't otherwise have. And then, of course, everything that we give to people has to be photographable, because we know it's going to end up back on the gram. So it's kind of a fun creative constraint, constantly thinking about this sort of, like, movement in and out of physical and digital. Also, celebrities were a big part of our strategy. So, like, around the 2014 World Cup, we couldn't get an interview with Neymar, but we could get his team to work with us to find like 6 accounts that he loves to follow. And then we do a little editorial write-up, include some pictures from his feed. And now it feels like, oh, I'm closer to Neymar, one of the biggest stars. We would also sometimes combine celebrities with the Instameet. So in this case, gold medal snowboarder Jamie Anderson met up with us at the X Games, and we hosted an Instameet where we went skiing with a bunch of folks at the X Games, and then she posted that on her feed, and it's just like this constant kind of cycle back and forth, where we're kind of breaking down the boundaries of like physical distances between communities. And then also like a big part of our effort was to like think outside the box, like push the boundaries of what we want to show. So actually, I found this feature on this sort of like digital artist who does these crazy mashups with sneakers. So he makes basically everything here is an element of a shoe, because the sneakerhead community was so big on Instagram. We're like, how do we tell a cool sneakerhead story? Like, who can we find that's going to blow people's minds? Because like when you have the most followers in the world, like you need to hold yourself to a pretty high standard, but you also get there by surprising people and not just showing them like the obvious stuff. Like, so the sneakerhead community all of a sudden is like, oh, here's our spin on sneakers. And we probably timed that to maybe around the NBA finals, because, like there's such a shoe culture around the NBA, and like the whole basketball community is really energized. And so like we found like an additional kind of like, evergreen piece of content that actually fits into a sort of timely schedule. So that's a pretty good sense of like what we did at Instagram. And, now I'm at mmhmm, and my career is continuing to follow the camera, which I love. I feel like I'm getting to push the boundaries of what we're doing with the camera on video now in a way that's different than photographer. And, I do a big part of what I'm doing right now is because we're so young, is I'm doing a lot of teaching. Like I'm training, like my goal is to be the best in the world at our own product. Like, because if I can't lead by example, then it's really hard for me to build a community, because I'm constantly playing defense. So I do a lot of education, because right now it's still hard to use. Well, it's not hard to use, but it's not as simple as Instagram. So a lot of people need coaching. So I do a lot of tutorials. I also talk to the community a lot, and I find out who are our star users. In fact, so this is a kind of clip of me with Garrett Leonard, who is a futurist and keynote speaker, and is just like using our tools masterfully. So, I'm able to like bring that to life, and sort of give more of our community sort of key pillars of people to sort of aspire to. And, and I also just like play around a lot. I'm constantly playing. So this is like a GIF with our logo that we made, but I'm wearing a green t-shirt. So I've actually like inverted the sort of the green screen kind of process by like turning my shirt into a green screen and like using sort of the Superman logo. So I'm just constantly thinking about like, what are like my little test kitchen. And then when I have to do something with the community, like I can always sort of feel like I'm leading by example, or I'm introducing new ideas. So I'm going to pause there, and Ollie, if that sounds good, we'll jump into questions.
Nice. So what I would love to maybe begin with, you guys launched a year ago, but it's almost like you've really cracked the marketing, or you've definitely caught people's attention. How have you started to build the community so early on? What are some of those golden nuggets you've done to acquire your first customers?
I think there's two sort of answers to that on two parallel tracks. One is like, I have some rules around community generally. Like the Instagram playbook is not going to work for but there are some truths that I sort of hold dear, and then there's some specific tactics to and like one of my first sort of general truths is that communities cannot grow in darkness. Like, you have to daylight your community, because that's the entire point of a community. Like, I gave an example at a panel recently. Like, the question was, what's the difference between an audience and a community? And like, if I go to a movie theater, like, that's a great example of an audience, right? I'm in the dark. I might be with my friends, but I'm pretty much alone. I'm having a pretty singular experience. I'm an audience member. I'm not contributing to the film. But like, if I go see Star Wars as an audience member, there is a giant effing community around Star Wars. And I can go to conventions. I can meet George Lucas. I can dress up like Chewbacca. Like, I can go on blogs. Like, all of a sudden, that audience moment becomes the seed of becoming a giant community, you know? So for me, like, communities like have to be daylighted in order to be communities. You have to show people and build connections. You have to foster connections between people so they find something that they really want. And I think you probably, like, why do we have communities in the first place? Well, they give us a sense of meaning. They give us a sense of place. They give us a sense of a connection. So if you want to build a community, you have to understand that your job is to engender connections. And you have to do that by flipping the lights on and saying, there's, you know, this person over here, there's this person over here, there's this person over here. And ultimately, I think, like, the second truth is, like, you have to be the best in the world at your own product. Like, you cannot build a community based on trust if you show up and you're at like 75% of the way there. And if your community is so great and they're like just blowing your minds, like, that's one thing. But if you want to start a community, you need to lead by example. And so I would say, like, parallel, like, jumping over to the mmhmm track, like, the first thing I did, I was just clear with my team. I was like, I can't build a community until I like know this product inside and out. And like, I spent a lot of R&D time just like fucking with shit. Like, I'm going to be totally honest. Like, I've got ridiculous stuff on my computer of me, like, as a Snapchat banana, like trying like Snapchat and I did a lot of research on late night talk show hosts. So Trevor Noah, Samantha Bee, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, when all those folks transitioned into working from home, like, it's really interesting to like take a critical eye and say, what decisions did they make? Samantha Bee, her show is called Full Frontal. I don't know if you guys have seen this show, but she's pretty much standing at 3/4 length. Like, you can always see from like her mid-thigh up. And that's actually a very intentional decision. Whereas Jimmy Kimmel was like very comfortable sitting at a desk, which is very similar to Seth Meyers. And I'm kind of like, oh, what are my cues? Like, everything that I do, every choice that I make, the community is going to see as a tacit approval of that format, right? So I need to be like pretty disciplined in my own decisions, because I know that I'm going to inspire copycat behavior. In fact, that's what I want. Like, I want to be the first influencer, right? So, and then there's a couple of reasons why I did that. First is, you won't believe how much that inspires my own teammates. Like, even my company, we're still getting good at like, we're still learning this. We're in transition. So we really need what we call like hand raisers, like the people who are like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to take this on. I'll step up. I'll be the first to do it. And then you need that within your own company, but you also need that within your community. And so a big part of my job is like, how do I discover who the hand raisers are? The people who are not in it for transactions, or who are not in it for money. They're just in it because they love being at the edge of new products, new software. They want to have a relationship to the CEO, whatever it is. And then like, you support those people, you daylight those people, and then you find out ways to find more of them. So like, we just recently did something called the 5-slide challenge. It's like, how can I create something so simple that gets people from 0 to 1 using mmhmm? And I just got off a call yesterday with the winner of the 5-slide challenge, who is like a perfect case study of why you do this. He had mmhmm. If he found it too difficult to use at first, he was unmotivated, and then like he like caught the bug on the 5-slide challenge. He won it. And now he's literally so into, he wants to start an education training academy for the rest of the community. Like that's the secret sauce. Like, how do you empower your community to scale your community building and your education? And for us, because education is so important at the outset, like I'm really trying to build a community around people who want to train, people who want to educate, which is different than like a community who wants to like monetize. Like we're not there yet. So communities really work in phases, and you have to be patient. I would even go as far as to say that building community is an anti-scale approach. Like building community is really an anti-scale endeavor until you get to the point you can scale. It's like a product. You have to have a great product before you can scale it. You have to have a good community before you can scale. I'll pause there.
What were some of those frameworks in the early stages of you guys launching a community in terms of getting your first beta users? It'd be great to just understand, launching a new product, you've got quite a senior figurehead as your founder, your first 100 customers, how did you go around acquiring those?
I joined in January, which was 6 months after the beta launched. And first off, I really like beta programs for building community. I think it is it's not flawless, it's not error proof, but it's really, really successful because it's like you're literally asking for the hand raisers. Who wants to come in and have access to our team? Who wants to share their knowledge? And who wants to who's invested in this? Like that's ultimately what a community is people who are invested in your success and are willing to contribute to that success. There's a lot of people, especially investors, you'll see this from investors, like they're literally invested, but they actually don't do that much for you. They actually don't evangelize. They don't know how to use your product, which is just I don't get it, but whatever. That's a different topic. But what's fun about community members is they'll be real with you, but you have to give them the opportunity to feel invested. And so by giving by giving up your product a little bit, right? And by saying hey, we're going to give you permission to shape the future of this, they'll get into it, and then they'll start evangelizing. They'll start telling their communities. It becomes this network effect, right? Before you have 1,000 community members, you have to have 100. Start with 100, and maybe start with 50. Who are your 50 people who are just who can't live without your product? That's actually a metric that we now factor for. And I think this came from Superhuman, which is we ask in surveys, how disappointed would you be if you could not have this product? And actually, the results of that survey were where I first started my community building. I filtered for that column, and the people who were most disappointed that if they couldn't have is my first group that I reached out to and started saying, hey, I'm Andrew. I'm the director of community. I'm in a discovery phase. I want to learn how you're using it. I want to learn, I have 3 questions. It was really simple. And I said, if you can share with me an example of your work, I'd love to see it. Because it's not like Instagram where I just have 1 million accounts. I can just scroll, with a lot of people are doing this in Zoom or sharing private business presentations. I'm I have no visibility, and I can't daylight people unless I know that they're good. I can't vouch for someone unless I've seen their presentation skills. So it's it's really manual. You gotta, but here's one thing, here's a discovery, there are diamonds in the rough. And for me, one of the people that I reached out to turns out is a professor of business at the Booth School of Business at UChicago, which is basically one of America's best business schools. When the pandemic hit, he completely rewrote his job description as a virtual teacher. He went out and bought all new equipment, and he won and he used and he just received the Teacher of the Year award from the University of Chicago. Like at a year in which like teachers suffered so much, he said, he's like, was the best thing that's happened to me in 20 years of teaching. And like, it shows. And I have like, I've achieved like a level of like notoriety for my teaching as a tenured professor, like that I had never achieved before, like doing it the old way. So like those kinds of stories, like you'll never find unless you just start asking, you know what I mean? So anyway, that's a big part of how I took our kind of like beta program and like some like survey stuff and like turned it into real success stories. And that's ultimately how you build community, is like by pointing to the wins, like who is winning, and like have a point of view about that. Like, this teacher is winning, this keynote speaker is winning, this startup founder is winning. And then like 3 wins become 6 wins, 6 wins become 12 wins. It becomes exponential at that point.
That's super interesting. I love that story. How has your community changed as you've scaled the sustainability, but also the culture? Has that retained? Has it shifted a little bit?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm at, the inflection point I'm at now is like, how do I actually like harness this, right? Like I've got disparate success cases all over the place. We're featuring people on certain blogs, but like, how do I actually bring the like music teacher that we like, who's just like using the app in such amazing ways, with the like professor of business, with the keynote speaker? Like, how do I actually get those people talking? That's where I'm at right now. And we're, I think, a couple weeks away from building, launching pretty simply like a Slack community that brings our top 50 folks together. I am super curious to see how that happens. So we're being really intentional, and we're writing to everybody in advance. We're like this, it's not like they're just going to wake up one day and like there's going to be an invitation to a Slack channel. It's like we're actually building with them in mind. We've given them kind of a long runway that like, this is what we want. We've asked them survey questions, because you want to like set the table, but you don't want to tell everybody what to say. Like, I think of community a lot as like a good party. Like, a good party is rarely like when the host stands up and hogs the spotlight. Like, that's not a great party. It's not a wedding. This is like a party, or like, imagine if I were to move to San Francisco and not have any friends, and my agenda, my tactic to make friends was to have like 1,000 friends in the first month. Like, nobody would trust me, right? Because I would have such shallow relationships. I'd much rather have 10 really great friends to build the foundation of a social network, here in a friend group in San Francisco, than like 1,000 shallow relationships. I think the same approach happens in building digital communities. Like, start with the 10 people you really want to spend time with, and then like connect them and form a group, and then expand that group. And I would say the other big kind of pivot or like change is it's really clear to me that our community is a business community. Is not right now for TikTok or for just like social sharing. This is really a professional tool, and like our top users are people who are in their like mid-career and really have a lot at stake by looking good on video. Like, their professional lives are contingent upon being able to be good on video, as good or better as if they were like in a room with a group of people. So for me, like, all signs point to LinkedIn. Like, that is like hundreds of millions of business professionals who want skills and training on like how to be great on video, because that's the new way of doing business. Also, the other thing about LinkedIn is it's one of the most out of balance social networks out there. There's a lot of followers and very little content. So for me, I'm like, okay, like, my community building effort is going to happen where the people are. And for me right now, my hypothesis is that it's going to happen on LinkedIn. And that's really clear for me. Like, and it's really clear for my team to be able to say, this is our tactics. We're going to be LinkedIn first. And we're going to, our Twitter strategy will probably be modified around that. It also means that like my TikTok strategy can be really experimental because I actually don't expect that to be my core demographic. You know what I mean? So I can be really playful in other places because I know where my priorities are. And I'm really curious to see how like leaning into LinkedIn changes things. And I'll say one more thing about how I think the community is going to shift. The other thing too is that and when you talk to Phil about this, it'll be clear, but like we have a pretty clear why statement. Like we're not just building virtual cameras because like, why not? We're building it because we actually see this massive shift in the way in which we can work as distributed teams. And right now we're at the ragged bleeding edge of this, but we want to be the signature product of a movement of people who are now distributed worldwide, who actually by leaning into video are now able to live a better life because they can live where they want and work where they want. And those things are not conjoined. So we actually have a responsibility to be thought leaders of the distributed work life. We have a responsibility to show people what you can do with a video update that allows you to cancel the big group meeting where nobody talks and you like waste up all these people's time. Like send a video update ahead of time. And then when you have your meeting, you can actually talk about specific things because people have already seen it. And like you've just given time back and you've made your one meeting much more efficient. Like those are the kinds of things that we're discovering that are part of this movement that we can now actually share. And it's not just about our product. Now we actually have something to say about how to work better. And I really want to build a community around that idea. We're maybe the signature product of that, but that's a movement. That's a community,
I think that's super interesting. Maybe going on the flip side, when you talked about being a really good host, you want to come to the community, where the great party is. But as soon as that host leaves the party, aka is no longer your community, what happens to that community? Because it dies, no? So if you were to leave tomorrow, what happens to the community? And how do you? Are there
what
any
happens if I leave? What happens if I leave?
Yeah.
Oh, great question.
And the reason why I ask is, what strategies have you thought about that the community will always be retained inside the organization you're in or the company you're building?
Well, I'd say the first thing is one of the best ways to prevent like community death is to have a product and design team that believes in community. Like if you build community into the product, then it's like, it's not contingent upon just my like heroic efforts. We actually talk about this a lot at like nothing that we do should require heroic efforts. Sometimes it does, but like as a default, like it should feel like it should feel like there's like it's widely supported, like we're kind of like all moving this together. So I would say first thing, you have to have buy-in from the top. Like it has to be part of the idea. Like, I mean, Clubhouse basically changes their, icon, their app store icon, I don't know, once a week, once a month with like pictures of community members. Like that obviously is like approved from the top. Like that's cool, that's a smart idea. So I think like everybody should be thinking about like, what is their unique, how do you build community into your product? Maybe it's, or like if it doesn't make sense in a specific product, like how do you build the community? Like, Atlassian like has and like Salesforce, they have so many programs that are like endorsed by the company that are sort of person agnostic, like the MVP program, the Hall of Fame, like all of those things. That may not be your community style, but like, I don't think Salesforce's community is going to die when like their director of community leaves because it's so baked into what they've got. But also but ultimately community death results from the community saying this is no longer valuable. Like even if you've got all these MVP programs, like I'm just over it, or I'm done, or you didn't hold up your end of the bargain, or you stopped being transparent. Like it's a lot about expectations. Like when you set expectations from the beginning, like you establish the culture. And when you establish the culture and then you change the culture, you're going to naturally get attrition. And sometimes that's healthy, and sometimes that's worthwhile. But yeah, I don't know. Like, and also like sometimes maybe the community does need to die. Maybe it's okay. You know, I don't know.
As well as the culture and retaining the culture is also incredibly time consuming. Not sure if you find the same. It's very rewarding and hugely valuable for the community, but it takes a lot of time, right? What's a typical day for you?
Yeah, I've got 2 direct reports. So there's like, our team is pretty small. Like right now it's just 3. I manage our social media manager, because community building for me is like very tied to our editorial point of view, our editorial voice, how we show up on social media. So I work with her, and I just converted our like sort of community support lead. I converted her. I did an internal hire as my sort of community programs lead. And it's funny, like she had never been part of a community team before, but I just really saw in her a person who really cares about people, who really is like, really cares about the experience and like solving people's problems. And I want someone like that. I want somebody who is really like nose to the ground, like listening to what the community is doing. Because I can strategize all day long. Like I can build programs, like I can, whiteboard. But at the end of the day, like managing a community means like showing up in that Slack channel, like maybe every day or like almost every day, and like facilitating the conversation. Like it's not something that you just set it and forget it. It takes, especially early on, it takes a lot of resources. So like, to be clear, yeah, building a community is not like designing a product that you can kind of just fidget with and tweak, and like when you're ready to launch, you just launch it. Like it's people, it's conversations, it's something that you need to put resources behind. But when you but like, I think the cost, I think it's worth it. I think it's totally worth it.
For sure, for sure. You got some really, really interesting insights, and I know we've only got about 10 minutes left, so I want to give the rest of the time to our community for you guys to ask Andrew any questions. Feel free to come to the stage, shout out your questions, and Andrew can answer. But maybe just before that, we've got a great question here from Krishan. When is the right time to hire your community person? And do you have any budget guidelines in mind on what our founders should be paying potentially?
So actually, interesting fact about Instagram, Mike and Kevin, the co-founders, started, the first hire was Josh, and Josh started the community team. So you have a pretty clear example there of like the first hire was community. Now, I don't think they knew exactly what Josh was going to do, but like they knew that they needed somebody who was like non-technical, like and Kevin is actually sort of famous for saying anybody can build an app, not everybody can build a community. And like I firmly believe that. And so I think like I would say the time to start a community team is like the moment you launch. And like this is only like from my sense, this is only like the trajectory is only going up and up. Like I expect community to be essential. Like in a few years, I wouldn't be surprised if like you see like VP of community. Like I've never seen that title, VP of community. I'm sure it exists somewhere, but like I wouldn't be surprised if major companies in the future have that. So go ahead and get started.
I actually have a follow-up question,
Yeah.
if I may, and it's Bar, by the way. So I understand you're saying like right at the beginning, jump into community building, and I know this is really important. I'm also in the creators economy, so it's a huge thing. What do you look for when you hire this first person that will start working on the community? What do you look for in this person?
Maybe just a quick question on that. Budget guidelines is why I think it'd be super useful.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty good report out there from the folks at COMSOR, COMMSOR. They do a annual like community salary guideline. I'm pretty sure it ranges from like 70K, the US dollar, 70K US to like 400,000. So it's a pretty wild range, but I would say that the average is like in the US, maybe like 80 to 120. I'd say that's sort of the like band of a community manager. And the like, what do I look for? So I think if you're a founder and you want to hire like a community team leader, like I think you want somebody with some strategy. Like I do. Like I really think you want somebody who's going to be able to like connect the dots and say, these are the insights I'm seeing. Like, and I'm going to turn those insights into programs, activations. But you also need somebody who's like going to represent your product. Like I think that's really essential. That like that your community person is probably going to be like very actively evangelizing your product and encouraging other people. And if they don't like to be on camera or they don't like to be seen, no matter how good at strategy they are, like I'm not sure they're going to be able to really represent and like engender a sense of community. It's like when you throw a party, like you want to hire, a party planner, like that's a certain kind of person, right? It's like they have a certain kind of attitude, a certain approach. You need people who like really want to be out there and really want to be in front of people and like encourage people and enable people, but are also going to like endorse and like be like experts in your product.
Thank you. That's amazing advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome thoughts. If anyone's got a question, just raise your hand. I believe there should be an option on the bottom of your screen, and we can bring you up. Before we go to Slav, I've just added the community mapping, which Comsert did. This basically has all of the community tools you should be you should look at, and they also have a community club. So if you're looking to hire a community person, I'm happy to add you, or I can recommend it to you. It's pretty awesome. But Slav, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Like really amazing insights and stories. Like we specifically here in Antler, we follow Phil's videos, and they're really interesting and amazing. So the CEO conveying like and presenting the product, that's really amazing. So my question is more like building the culture inside and the communities inside the startup. Like how different is this, and like should we, how, as we're building our startups right now and building the outside community and the customers and inside the culture, like how we should differentiate this and, people building the culture and the community in the same time. Is this overlapping at some point? Maybe some insights from your experience, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think I understand. I think I understand the question. I'll take a stab at it. I really like this idea that company culture is like built around an awareness of the community. So one of the things that I really try to do at mmhmm is I share a lot of mmhmm content, not that I make, but that like from the community. Like I constantly am trying to show the design team, the product team. I want them to be aware of how people are how people are using mmhmm. So that actually, but that's also a culture building technique within mmhmm, right? I'm actually like, I'm helping to make the voices, the faces of our community, like part of how we connect with each other within the company. So I think that content, bringing it out and just sharing it internally is a really great way to help build an internal culture where people are really aware that the community exists, and then your designers and your engineers, like they're going to start to have more empathy for these individual people because they're going to see their faces, they're going to see how it shows up. It's also, as you probably know, so valuable to constantly show engineers how people use their product in unexpected ways to help them get out of their own way of like how it has to be. And then I would say, in terms of like for the culture, for the community, you need to like, I think it's helpful to put like sort of guardrails around like what's out of bounds. Like establish your terms of service from the beginning. Like be clear about your community guidelines. You know, like I said, set the table. But it's not. But then give a lot of space for people to fill in what they want. Like create a lot of space for connections to build. And like when two people connect, I mean, you're kind of a matchmaker too. You're like, oh my gosh, I really want to introduce you to this person because I think you guys, like your styles are so unique. And then those two people build connections, and then like connections start to form. And then the culture is actually built by the people who are participating. It's not really your job to like dictate the culture. The culture emerges from the conversations, from the co-participation of everyone else. Your job is to make sure that it doesn't go in like the wrong direction. And I'll tell you, if it goes in the wrong direction, you're going to end up like Vine. And like Vine was a company that did not put any restrictions on their content, and it got really dark really fast. And I don't know if you follow Zach King, but Zach King is an Instagram star, and we basically poached him from Vine. He was a Vine star. We saw that he was like absolutely somebody we wanted on Instagram, and when he came into the office, that was another thing. We would bring people into the physical offices, and he's like, Vine is so toxic. He's like, the comments are so dark. Everybody's so just like gnarly. But he's like, when I post something on Instagram, the first hour is like a rainbow. He's like, everyone is so positive. And that actually became a big part of, that actually became a campaign at Instagram where kindness was a major, major company initiative. Like we knew that if we continued, if we did not have a strong point of view about positivity and around like tolerance and kindness, that like we were actually like putting ourselves at risk. So we actually built a culture of kindness into the product and built teams around the concept of like not just anti-bullying, that's table stakes. Actually going one step further and saying we believe in kindness. So our sticker packs were reflecting like ideas around kindness. Like we did influencer like campaigns around teen influencers where we talked about like people that they're thankful for or like kindness, you know? So we started to like actually lean into those things that I think shaped the product and the culture community.
Awesome insights. Hope that helps everyone. We've got one last question. Colin, the stage is all yours.
Hello. My question for you is, I don't know how much experience you have with kind of like the physical product, community building atmosphere, but the idea that, say I'm a pre-launch company here, how do I build a community around this idea that none of my, like the people I anticipate using this program are all on one platform? Not everyone's on Instagram, or sometimes I see Instagram as kind of more of a one-way communication channel. And I would say these older Gen Zs that I'm going after don't always necessarily use Facebook. What do you say is the best way? Is it sometimes a combination of communities, or what is some novel ways you've kind of seen to build this digital community when some of your users are really fragmented?
Totally. I think, so one of the insights that I've recently arrived at, which I think is like a healthy evolution, is that I actually think about community from a kind of like, from a very multi-channel perspective, because you need to show up where your people want to be. And there's actually some new tools out there. So ComSoar is a company, there's another startup called Common Room. And what they basically do is they enable you to monitor and kind of discover where your community is. So you plug in all of your like your LinkedIn, your Slack channels, you know, into like Twitter feeds, and you can actually see where the voices are popping up. So what I would tell you is that like, if some people want to show up on Instagram, like that's great. That's where they want to be. If they want to be on LinkedIn, like that's also great. Like you can also, but like in my opinion, like I think we're going to get the most bang for our buck on LinkedIn. So that's why I'm going to lean into it, but I'm not going to turn off YouTube. I'm not going to turn off these other channels. But I would say the cool thing about a physical product is it's something that like there's a magic to that three-dimensionality, right? There's magic to being able to hold something or touch something or like, and you can photograph, three-dimensional things pretty easily. And so like I've seen like there's a moving company that just basically like will send you green crates to like box up your stuff. Their Instagram is amazing. Like, and all they have is like green boxes, but they've actually designed and branded themselves very specifically to be photographed. Like they have a very clear set of brand guidelines for their three-dimensional product so that they have so that it's easy to have a strong presence on social. You know what I mean? Also like, I really believe in breaking the digital divide. Like I think digital products should totally get together and like in person and have like physical experiences. And I totally think that like physical products and physical experiences like have so much extra life on digital. So I would say like do whatever you do, like do it to the best that you can. So like if you only have the resources to focus on one platform, like you might just have to like acquiesce to some of these other platforms and just say like we're not there yet, I'm leaning into like these two, but like commit to those two, and like let the it's like a flywheel. Like it takes it takes a little while at first, but then it starts to get easier and easier and easier. And then once you like do that, you can then all of a sudden it's easier to start to build a community over here. And like maybe the last point that I will leave you with. Maybe if I've got a couple of minutes, I'll just share my last story from Instagram. And this was like a really important discovery, which is that like, okay, imagine it's 2014, your Instagram, you can basically do anything you want, right? You've got all the money, you've got millions of users, you're on this rocket ship. Like, how do you choose? Or do you choose? And the two communities that we focused on as a company at the very beginning was very deliberate. The first community was the fashion community. And that's because we saw that the fashion industry loved Instagram so much. Like it was just so clear that like we had such great product market fit. It opened up all this new opportunity. And the second community that we invested in was one that was actually one of our biggest threats. And that was the photography community. Like the National Geographics of the world, the New York Times photographers of the world, like we believe that if they did not use Instagram, we were seriously compromising like our vision. And it's not because they're the most active users in the world or the most influential, but they actually like, if the world's best photographers don't believe in your product, like it really undercuts your message. It really undercuts like trust from a kind of from the photographic standard bearers. So we actually like that. It wasn't music. It wasn't athletes. Like we were like, we need to build our playbooks, and we're going to start with the one that has the most momentum, and we're going to start with the other one that has the most amount of headwinds. And we really, really learned a lot from that. And so I would also say that like sometimes it really pays off to lean into your enemies or like lean into your skeptics, because you're going to learn a lot from them. And if you can solve it for them, you can definitely solve it for the people who already want your product.
Nice. I think that's like brilliant insights, and probably one of the best ways, one of the greatest insights to unfortunately say goodbye. The hour has gone so quickly, but we're so grateful for your time. And I've included your LinkedIn in the chat. I hope you get bombarded so everyone can share the love and all the amazing insights you're providing, and with and the rest. But I also mentioned in the chat we've got a fireside chat with Phil, the founder of in a couple of weeks next month with Magnus, our CEO. So I hope you guys can all be there. Andrew, I think you're also going to be there. It's all from the registration. So hope to see you all guys there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. And Andrew, your advice has been incredible. Yeah. Really appreciate your time, and hope to see all you guys very soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.